Welcome back to the Reach Every Student podcast. I'm your host, John Bergman. Before we start talking about today's topic, that our kids are not okay, I want to encourage you to think about your summer PD goals. I've created 3 courses that really help teachers prepare themselves in this world of AI. I'm convinced that flipped learning particularly is going to help you navigate the world of AI significantly. To that end, I have created 3 courses: Flipped Learning K-12 in the Age of AI, Flipped Learning Higher Ed in the Age of AI, and Mastery Learning in the Age of AI. You can find that at johnbergman.com/courses. And now for today's topic. Today I want to talk about the state of our kids. And our kids are not okay. None other than the late Pope Francis, who, as you know, recently passed away. He said on a trip to Bethlehem, he said this: "Children are a diagnostic sign, a marker indicating the health of families, society, and the entire world." He said this: "Whenever children are accepted, loved, cared for, and protected, the family is healthy, society is more healthy, and the world is more human." He continued and said, "Children need to be welcomed and defended from the moment of their conception. All too many children," still quoting Pope Francis, "continue to be exploited, mistreated, enslaved, and prey to violence and illicit trafficking." And though I'm not living in the world of deep poverty, in a world where I see trafficking happening to my students, I see that we have a huge issue going on in our kids. See, I started teaching in 1986. In 1986, students were different. And then in 2011, as some of you may know, I had published a book. Actually, about 2012, I think, is when I stepped away from the classroom teaching. And I then basically went on a world tour after my first book was published. And I traveled the world working with schools. And so I was away from direct contact with students until I returned to the classroom in 2019. And when I returned to the classroom, I remember remarking to some of my friends, I said, "I've never seen such a high incidence of student mental health issues going on." And I said, "What's going on with this? What happened in those intervening years when I left teaching and then came back to teaching?" And that has been voiced and clarified to me in the last couple of weeks as I have picked up the copy of The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Jonathan Haidt's book has been terrifying for me to read, and yet also it speaks to what I saw. He has put his finger on what has happened to our kids, and he cites so much. If you've not picked up a copy of this book, I would highly encourage you to pick up this book. He cites a couple of things: the rise of teen mental illness, which I saw when I returned back to the classroom, just alarming rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide that has happened in the last decade or so. And it's not just in the US, it's across multiple countries, mostly in the developed countries. And he then finds causality in what he calls the rewiring of our childhood. He argues that there was a shift that occurred at how children are growing up today than, say, when I grew up back in the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, I'm old. And we moved from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. And I'm seeing that there's this, and that rewiring has changed how students interact with the world. And as a child, me and my friends would just like disappear and then go play outside, whatever. And we'd play games and we would kickball and we would have fights, but then we'd have to work it out. And one thing Haidt really says, I think it's almost one of his best quotes, is we are overprotective in the physical world for our students, our kids, and we are underprotective in the virtual world. And if you know anything, the virtual world is much more dangerous than the physical world, pretty much. And yeah, so there's a lot of things going on in this book that really, he talks more about negative impacts, and he attributes a lot of this to smartphones, social media particularly. He goes and he talks about how social media and the smartphones have really hurt students. He talks about how it's actually social deprivation. The students have limited interactions with their peers. They are getting less sleep, and that's terrible. There's even a thing about this was just terrible, is that because people are blinking less, so physiologically blinking less because they're staring at screens, then there are eye problems they're developing. And it's, attention fragmentation. Students have more, they have shorter attention spans, and many students get addicted to these things. There's a huge increase in loneliness and also social comparison, particularly among young women. And he sees this also as a social contagion. Again, sees this. It's not like just his ideas. He backs it up with data, et cetera, et cetera. And then he spent a bit of time talking about how it's different for young men and young women, and they have different issues that we're seeing. I won't go into that right now, but it's terribly alarming. And this has been mirrored in my own career as I've gone back, as I've seen this huge anxiousness amongst students and depression, anxiety, and even where I sit now, a lot of the students have been taken to treatment facilities, and some of that has really helped. I've seen it be very powerful in helping students as well when they've gotten the treatment that they need. And so our kids aren't good. They're not okay. And, Haidt wrote this book, and this was really when the AI world takes off. So he doesn't really address AI and about how it might change and impact our children. And I am continually being concerned about where this is headed for us as a society. We need to be very careful. Again, go back to Pope Francis's idea. We need to protect our children, right? Wherever children are accepted, loved, and cared for and protected, the family is healthy, the society is more healthy, the world is more human. And if there is a charge that we as adults have in this world, it is to protect our kids. But what does that mean, and what does that look like? And so we need to be thoughtful as we look at things such as artificial intelligence, and we need to protect them. I was listening to another podcast this morning about AI and education, and students are offloading cognition to AI. I mean, I am doing that, right? I even in this podcast, I asked AI to generate some thoughts for me, but you and I are dealing with students who have a developing brain. They are young. Their brain is still more plastic than yours or mine, and we need to be very careful about what we do. I mean, we need to really address a couple of questions. Like, number one is, what's the point of education? Is it just information transfer? I would argue part of it is. There are certain things that we as a society, and different societies may have different ideas on this, but there are certain things our society says that students should know and be able to do, right? We want them to become positive citizens in our democracy. So we should teach citizenship. But we also need to teach them how to think. Number two, we need to teach them how to think, the process of thinking, the process of becoming critical thinkers. And if they let AI do the critical thinking for them, then I believe we're going to have stupefaction of our students. And we don't want to diminish. We don't want to do harm. Google's saying, do no harm. Google, by the way, has done harm. What harm are we doing to our kids? And we want to predict it. If Haidt's right, and I believe he is that particularly social media has been detrimental to our students. And we didn't see that before we did this mass experimentation on them and gave them access to social media. Now that AI is about to take over the world, and maybe it already has, we need to do some work and not allow that to happen with AI. Now, AI is here to stay. The cat's out of the bag. I've said this before. We need to think how to ethically, thoughtfully teach this to our students. But we also need to know when to not use AI, because we don't want students to be stupefied, to lose cognitive thinking skills. One of the reasons we teach students to write is because it helps them understand the thinking process. It helps them to become critical thinkers. But now it's too easy for a student, if you assign them a paper to write, for them to just offload that and let ChatGPT, whatever, write the paper for you. And then they have done no critical thinking. And so we need to be very thoughtful in not just how we deliver content and how we structure our classes, but we need to be very thoughtful in how we need to be thoughtful not only in how we structure our classes and what we're teaching them, but kind of in what context that is. We're probably going to have to rethink what is the most important aspects of an education, because they are going to get out there. They're going to get out in the world. They're going to get a job someday. And as they get that job, they're going to use AI in some way to enhance their work. And we've got to really be thoughtful about this. And as some of you may know, I saw this morning on my news feed that President Trump has just issued an executive order. And I want to talk some more about this in a future episode. But his executive order essentially is saying that we want to start almost like a space race on AI, right? It's transforming. I'm reading from the report here. Artificial intelligence is rapidly. I'm reading from the report right now. AI is rapidly transforming the modern world, driving innovation across all industries. And the big idea is that we need to create a society that's going to help students become, as he says, or whoever wrote this, have AI literacy. We need to promote AI literacy among Americans, and we need to start that with our kids. I believe this is probably a response to a similar measure that happened in China recently. And this is the world that we're going to live in, and we need to teach students how to thoughtfully use AI, but we don't want it to happen at the expense of other students. And I guess my thinking at this stage, I hope I'm wrong. I think we're going to get a bifurcation of our society in that we're going to have those who are using AI to accelerate their work and to just do amazing things. AI can do some great things. It's already done some great things, and with medicine. And I mean, it's got such great positive potential. But again, I'm an educator, and I work with developing minds of young people. And if that's the case, I want to make sure that they are prepared to use the AI thoughtfully in the world to come. And we've got to really be careful about when we use AI. I mean, one thing I'm concerned about, I mean, I'm jumping into the topic here. Maybe, I have not done a deep read of this, but he talks, or the executive order talks a little bit about AI use at early ages. It's not defined, it looks like, and I may be wrong, but I'm not sure it's a good idea at all for young students, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old students, to be using AI. There's so much going on in our world with our students. Our students are not okay. And to some degree, it's our fault. And so what we need to do is, as we approach the AI world, I want to encourage you, my listeners, to deeply think, get into a dialogue, reach out to me, and maybe we can have a conversation about what are some of the solutions. And I did promise last week that I would dive into a solution that we are developing here at my school, and I didn't. I'm going to postpone that because the jury's out. We're doing like a trial test with some students to see if this will help. And I think it is an innovative idea, not mine, that somebody came up with that I think is going to make a big difference. Thanks for listening to this podcast. This is John Bergman. I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and please share it with your friends. It's super easy with any podcast app you use. And if you want to do me a solid, I think that's the kids' terminology, give me a podcast review to get this in front of more eyes, or is that ears? So now I encourage you to go out and reach every student. You can find out more at reacheverystudent.com. John Bergman out.